Here in Britain, a Harrier pilot from the task force has been talking about the air battle over the Falklands. Lieutenant Commander Tony Ogilvie, who's back in Britain because of an ear infection, took part in the first air raid on Port Stanley airfield in May. He led 4 Harriers from HMS Hermes on a mission to knock out Argentine anti-aircraft defences. At a Ministry of Defence press conference, he spoke of the role of the Harriers and the opposition from the Argentine Air Force.
The job of the Harrier has been predominantly protection of the ships in the AOA, the amphibious operating area, and the Sound itself. And if you think of the number of aircraft involved by the Argentinians, on their big days they put over 35 raids across the island. That's possibly up to 70 or 80 aircraft in a day. Then, given that we can put, and we did, fly the aircraft to the limits, the ships in the Sound are producing the best they've got, and they have got some superb close-range missiles. Someone is going to get through.
Later, Ray Maloney asked Tony Ogilvie about the missiles being used in the fighting.
I think that there are a number of missiles that are coming out head and shoulders above the overall level of fighting. The Sidewinder missile we're using, the Seawolf missile that the Navy's employing on the Type 22, and indeed the Sea Dart battery, and also from the Argentinians' side, the Exocet missile are proving very, very lethal indeed.
More lethal than people had expected them to be.
I think the Sidewinder's kill ratio and the rate of success is quite staggering. I think some of the after effects of an Exocet missile attack hadn't possibly been realized before we were struck by them, to the extent at which a missile of that size can do damage to, or indeed incapacitate a ship with such things as choking smoke and the rapid movement of smoke throughout an entire ship. There are lessons being learnt by the minute down there, obviously, but indeed lethality of the weapons, the ones that are actually making the hits, is quite an eye-opener.
The Soviet government has told Israel to withdraw its troops from Lebanon, saying the Israeli invasion is affecting Soviet interests in the area. A statement from Moscow described the Israeli advance as a criminal act of genocide. Israeli troops have now surrounded Beirut, cutting off the city. They say they've trapped 5,000 Palestinian guerrillas inside it. Israel's defense minister, Mr. Ariel Sharon, said he visited East Beirut last night. The Lebanese president has nominated leaders of the country's different political factions to a national salvation board, but its first meeting had to be cancelled because 3 of those nominated refused to attend. The American Special Envoy, Mr. Philip Habib, has arrived in Damascus from Jerusalem to discuss Israel's conditions for a withdrawal with Syrian leaders. We have reports from both sides of the fighting.
The Israelis arrived overnight and by morning had positioned themselves on hilly slopes overlooking Beirut. It was the closest Israeli forces have ever been to an Arab capital, and proof that should they wish to advance into the city itself, they probably can do so with ease. The reaction of villagers was largely one of joy. Some were afraid of what might happen next, but most seemed pleased about the presence of the Israelis. One woman posed by a tank. Many went about their business as usual or struck up conversations with the soldiers. For the Israelis themselves, it was a happy and emotional moment.
They are kissing us and blessing us. I would say that I have the feeling as the American army in the Second World, how they come and they send the people free. This is a very deep feeling.
Israeli tanks were within yards of the presidential palace, but there was no resistance from the Lebanese army. Resistance by the Palestinians may be a different story, however. Guerrilla units were still well entrenched south of the Lebanese capital, where heavy shelling was going on today. After a heavy pounding by Israelis in recent days, the guerrillas appeared to be tired, sometimes disorganized, but still well-armed enough to inflict heavy casualties on the Israelis if the Israelis try to advance. By comparison, they would seem no match for the Israelis. Gun-toting, disheveled teenagers, some of them, up against a modern, well-equipped force. Although the guerrillas are now alone, since most Syrian forces have evacuated their positions, there was no talk of defeat, no mention of possible surrender.
When they come here, we will kill them. If they destroy these buildings, they destroy these buildings, we will be behind these buildings. In the ruins, we will fight them. They are our enemies. They dismissed us from Palestine, and they are following us here now. All the world must recognize our rights in Palestine. I am born in Palestine. They are playing in my gardens, in my home.
Israeli heavy artillery has kept up a relentless barrage, sending the heavy explosive shells towards the outskirts of West Beirut. The Israeli army could now have fire bases like this all around the Lebanese capital. The headquarters of the Palestine Liberation Organization in the west of the city is cut off, and reports this evening say the Israelis called on the PLO there to surrender their top 10 leaders. Several Israeli government ministers have said today there's no intention of capturing Beirut, but even without that move, this part of the Israeli military operation may now soon be complete. This war has taken a heavy toll in casualties, not just amongst the combatants. Two towns, Sidon and Tyre, with a total population of 200,000, have been devastated. Lebanese police reports reaching here say that in the south and in Beirut, 9,500 may have been killed, countless wounded, and 600,000 homeless. Another casualty that must be listed is the Soviet-made firepower of the Syrians. The Israelis today put on show a score of Syrian tanks captured before the ceasefire with Syria 3 days ago. Derek Taylor, News at 10, Israel.
In part 3 of this specially extended News at 10, we'll have more on the Falklands surrender. Plus cricket and how Kapil Dev knocked England's early hopes for 6. In a couple of minutes.
Look into Fads and you won't just find the best in paint and paper. Fads also have the best wallpaper adhesives you can buy, like Solvite.
When you're decorating the home that you're making, solve it with Solvite. No problem at all.
Fed up, eh?
Too right.
Let me guess. That hot potato's got to be in Fishguard before lunch tomorrow.
No.
By courier to the door.
That's it!
Don't know where to turn.
No.
First lift at the lights. For your nationwide and international urgent deliveries, no one does it better than Datapost.
Every day this summer, Aer Lingus has Super Apex fares to Ireland. For details, see your travel agent or call Aer Lingus.
Every ITT television is tested against 7 special test cards. How does your set stand up to this one? These should be grey, not coloured. This should be a perfect circle, and this red rectangle should be between those lines. I'd love to show you how sharp and true to life all this makes ITT's picture, but unless you're watching an ITT television, you wouldn't appreciate it, would you?
We're going back to Westminster again now, and to our political editor, Glyn Mathias, who's talking to the Liberal leader, Mr. David Steele.
Mr. Steele, it appears the conflict is now really over. Is this the end of the fighting, do you think, and the start of the diplomacy?
I hope so, and I think the mood in the House a few minutes ago was one of tremendous relief and unanimous congratulation to the forces for an operation very well conducted. I think, too, having just come into the studio and seen the pictures, which your viewers will have been watching, of the wounded and the burials, I think the general public mood will be one of great relief that this has been brought to an end without any further loss of life or injury.
But has the sacrifice been worth it?
Well, the great principle that was at stake was whether in this day and age we allow any nation to conduct international argument by use of force. That was the principle, and I think we've shown that it doesn't pay. Of course, we've now got to start the diplomacy, and I hope very much that there will be an international endorsement of a settled future for the Falkland Islands.
What, in your view, now is the major priority for the future of the Falklands?
Well, the immediate priority, of course, is to secure the peaceful withdrawal of the Argentines and the reconstruction of the of the peaceful settlements on the islands. But in the longer term, I think that the United Nations will have to be involved in endorsing security for the islands, otherwise they'll be open to perpetual Argentine aggression.
Finally, does this outcome prove, in your view, that the government has been right all along in its approach to the conflict in the Falklands?
I think that this is a night when we should congratulate the government on the supervision of what has been an excellent operation.
Mr. Steele, thank you very much indeed.
Now, cricket, England have to bat again and score 65 runs tomorrow to win the first Cornhill Test against India at Lord's. At one stage today, the tourists were struggling to save the game, but then Vengsarkar and Kapildev changed all that. Here's Ian Edwards.
Vengsarkar was largely responsible for holding the Indian innings together. His 20th boundary gave him 150, but his positive play caught him out. Caught by Allott after making 157, and after him, the Indian middle order fell apart. Sharma bowled by Willis for 37. Willis took his 250th Test wicket in the same over. Malhotra caught by Taylor for a duck, but Kapildev was to stop the rot. He punished both them severely with a 6 and 3 fours in 1 over. 2 more 6s in successive balls of Edmonds embarrassed England even further. He looked set for one of the fastest ever Test centuries when he drove Botham into the hands of Cook. But it had been a brilliant 89, and not for nothing has he been dubbed the Haryana Hurricane. For after forcing England to bat for an unexpected second innings, he brought the wickets tumbling down. Tabaret beaten by sheer pace. And Taylor wondering why he was put in at all, staying only to say hello and goodbye. England were reeling at 13 for 2, but Kapildev hadn't finished. He had Cook LBW to round off a remarkable performance that obliges England to bat again tomorrow to make sure of victory. Ian Edwards, ITN Sport at Lord's.
Football now, and 2 World Cup matches were played in Spain today. In Group 1, Italy drew with Poland 0-0, and in Group 6, Russia 1, Brazil 2.
Kevin Keegan may miss England's opening World Cup game against France on Wednesday. The England captain hurt his back during training over the weekend, and today he's only been able to do light training. Trevor Brooking is also doubtful for the game. The England manager, Ron Greenwood, says he'll name the team tomorrow. 2 buses chartered to carry Scottish fans to the World Cup games have been set on fire in Torremolinos. No one was hurt. England fans in Spain have been finding it increasingly difficult to get tickets for Wednesday's game. They say prices on the black market are soaring.
And that main story once again. Mrs. Thatcher has told the Commons tonight that the Argentines are flying white flags over Port Stanley. Negotiations for a full surrender are underway. The Prime Minister said British troops had been ordered not to fire except in self-defence. The Argentines had earlier said a ceasefire had been agreed until 2 p.m. our time tomorrow. Ray Maloney is at the Ministry of Defence now.
Here at the Defence Ministry tonight, the word from very senior officers is, and I quote, "We are sure it's all over," unquote. British troops, it said, are in total control of Port Stanley from their positions on the outskirts. Indeed, some troops may be already inside the town, to such a degree of control that the Argentines, it said, have finally been convinced that there is absolutely no sense in continuing to fight. Officials here say that negotiations will go on throughout the night, with both Buenos Aires and London involved, and that at dawn tomorrow the final arrangements for the Argentines to lay down their weapons will be completed. General Menendez, the Argentine commander, contrary to other reports, is said to be still on the islands. The British command made contact with him by radio to arrange the meeting. We don't know exactly where or exactly when at which this ceasefire was settled. The only one point of doubt here is whether, as Mrs. Thatcher demanded tonight, any ceasefire agreed tomorrow will involve both West and East Falkland. Ray Maloney, News at 10 at the Ministry of Defence.
That's the momentous news tonight. Good night.
Next, the Thames News headlines, that's followed by tonight's World in Action report.
Harry has 8 cans of SKOL. He drinks one himself, then gives one each to Bert and Jack. Then Jim pops in with 4 more cans, but he's brought Val and Samantha with him, and they all have one each. Then Paul and Malcolm turn up with a couple of friends, and they drink another 4. Being a scholar, Harry has calculated that he's still able to enjoy a quiet can of SKOL and give Samantha one. When you know lager, you're a scholar.
Look, you're not going to believe this. Real dairy cream from Anchor, but in a can.
Oh.
Incredible. Now you just go squirt, 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 and you've got untold squirts left. And it'll still keep in the fridge for ages. Oh, it's fab. In fact, you just can't beat it.
Oh.
Do you get it?
Anchor, real dairy cream. You just can't beat it.
The new Talbot Samba. Advance number 4. Samba's independent suspension gives you the cushioned ride and smooth feel of a bigger car. Plus superb comfort and speed. New Talbot Samba, the meanest little mover on the market.
There's one drink for slimmers that's worth its weight in gold. Tea. Best drink of the day.
You can trust the dealers in Car Buyer. Car Buyer, in your newsagents now, only 20p.
Announcing an incredible new product from Solvite. Universal filler and sealant. Tough and easy to use. It fills and seals. Fixes and grouts. Protects your home, both outside and in. In fact, it solves almost every filling and sealing job imaginable. Solvite Universal filler and sealant.
Solve it with Solvite. No problem at all.
Ashbourne Water. Truly English water.
Good work by Hollins. Oh, against the post. Can he do it? He can! John Hollins!
I'm a professional footballer. I've been one for 20 years. That means keeping really fit and healthy, which is why I've never been a smoker. No way. And even if you're only knocking a ball around with the kids, cigarettes could still ruin your game.
Look after yourself.
Good evening. 6 North London men will appear in Old Street Magistrates Court tomorrow, charged in connection with last night's Chicago-style killing. Robert Harris, landlord of the Atlas Public House in Stoke Newington, was killed and 2 companions wounded when a gunman blasted the car they were driving with a shotgun. The law lords have today been considering whether a North London man whose murder conviction was quashed in March should face a new trial. Newton Rose from Stoke Newington was jailed for life in December for the killing of a National Front sympathiser, but his conviction was quashed on appeal because the judge had given the jury a deadline to reach a verdict. The law lord's decision isn't expected for 3 weeks. The partially clothed body of an elderly woman was discovered near Longgrove Hospital in Epsom this evening. She was found by a jogger in an overgrown pathway just after 6 o'clock. Police are appealing for witnesses who were near Longgrove Hospital this afternoon. A passer-by was injured today when the roofs of 4 houses in Notting Hill collapsed, sending tons of bricks and masonry crashing to the pavement. All the houses on Portland Road were unoccupied. Britain's largest street cleaning machine can now be found rumbling through the streets of Ealing. The Grime Buster can hold up to 10 tonnes of waste as it plods along at 10 miles an hour. It cost £50,000 and will become the flagship of Ealing's 6-strong fleet of street cleaners. Finally, the Thames weather overnight dry, tomorrow cloudy later on, but staying dry. Top temperature 18 centigrade, 64 Fahrenheit. That's it from me. Now on Thames World in Action.